Welcome back to another SC Evo cast. This time it's a best of 3. In the top right it is Shin. And in the bottom left we do have Rebellion. Both of these players being more well known, if not only really known, as a StarCraft 2 player. But both of them, I am 90% sure are Korean. I am 90% sure Rebellion is. I'm 100% that Shin is. Rebellion doesn't really get to a lot of offline tournaments, but he does actually sign up in quite a few of the online tournaments. I feel like there's like 2 players who aren't at the top of the competition, but are pretty freaking good. Like they can compete, obviously. Who I always misremember their races. I'm like, I swear this guy was a Terran player. I swear this guy was a Protoss player. And then they're the opposite. So I don't know if that's Rebellion's case here, but he is obviously playing Brood War Protoss. And Shin is right now playing StarCraft 2 Zerg. So in this tournament, the SC Evolution League number 2 here today, we have a rule that they have to basically swap. So just to get the actual rule set out loud, because I keep confusing myself trying to figure this out in my head. Seedings based on a Ligulac and prior performance in the series. You must select your Brood War and StarCraft 2 main race at the start of the event, so they have to choose, you know, Brood War Zerg, StarCraft 2 Proto, something like that. And no off racing and higher seed. Game 135, a higher seed picks who plays Brood War and who plays StarCraft 2. And then games 2 and 4, it's the opposite. There we go. What the hell? Okay. What the hell? Oh my god, this is so funny, actually. Oh! I have to sneeze, but it's actually very funny. This is a StarCraft 2 game, actually. Oh, it's doing that thing where I can't sneeze now because I'm thinking about it. Okay, so what's funny about this is that this is actually a StarCraft 2 thing. But it makes the most sense as a Brood War Protoss to do this. Because you already forge fast expand in Brood War. In StarCraft 2, you don't forge fast expand anymore. It's just not a thing, really. I mean, in ladder, you can do whatever, but it's not a thing competitively. So Zerg players have actually done this to turn this into a cheese on this gold base. And then Protoss players have scouted it fast enough to make a forge fast expand happen. But the apparent, I talked to pro gamers about it. Apparently, the answer for the Zerg is just like not build the hatchery, just cancel it. But that's already too far gone, obviously. So there's definitely things that could have happened differently. Like Shin could have canceled his hatchery and not bothered pulling the drones and all that good stuff. Rebellion, you know, could have never scouted this and actually not been able to do the cannon rush, which that would have been the best thing for Shin, obviously. And instead, like, yeah, Shin gets this hatchery, he's going to have a die. Rebellion, he obviously has to afford extra buildings, so it is a cost for him to kill this. But he didn't change his build order all that much compared to a StarCraft 2 person who now has a forge that they didn't really want. So it's really interesting that we see this on this mod, even though this map actually is like it's a thing, and Shin is one of the Zerg players who would do the cheesy things. So it's not really surprising to see him do it in general, but it is kind of shocking to see him do it versus the guy who default has cannons. Anyway, yeah, it is what it is. Shin loses that hatchery. He costs his opponents a decent amount of minerals. You know, maybe arguably this could be 1 cannon, 1 pylon, but if that was the case, the Lings would have taken care of it, so you do have to invest into the second cannon. And Shin did really, really, really intend to have that hatchery. He tried to save it. That wasn't a, oh, okay, never mind, cancel the hatch, save the drone, never pull the drones. So this is really awkward for Shin. Whereas, like, as I was saying, Rebellion, like, it's a little awkward for the extra cost, but it's basically what he was going to do anyway with the Forge Fast Expand. He's going to go into a Reaver drop. He is getting... Oh, this is Dragoon range. I remember having to think that through, but this is Dragoon range. And it does seem to be a rather powerful 2-base all-in, basically, from the Protoss player. Well, this Dragoon was on the wrong side of history. Poor guy. So the idea is kind of like a StarCraft 2 all-in, actually. But Brood War is definitely the OG, which is you can Reaver drop into a Dragoon Zealot push. You don't have to all-in with it, but it can be a dedicated pressure. Is this the anti-Overlord Dragoon being flown around? I think that was supposed to be the anti-Overlord Dragoon, but he doesn't see the Overlords. The Overlords. That's funny. Not that this Overlord could be reached. This one could for a couple of shots. But maybe this isn't the... Maybe it is an anti-Dragoon... An anti-Overlord Dragoon. But it also is going to help with the Reaver. Fair enough. So the Reaver is going to be in the shuttle, which is now going... Well, eventually going to have shuttle speed. Otherwise, it's... as slow as you can see it is. Not a safe thing to use. I don't believe we mean to have 2 Citadels of a Dune. I don't think that's a thing. And that's unfortunate. That's a lot of money. I want to say 150, 100, but I actually don't know. But it's money that was better spent elsewhere. The Reaver, there he goes. Woo! Vroom, vroom. I like the Dragoon. I think the Dragoon is just literally the tank, potentially. You know, if a shot is wasted on the Dragoon instead of the Reaver, or more importantly, the shuttle, then great. But Shin does manage to focus fire pretty consistently. Gets that shuttle very, very injured. Shin had a very awkward opener, but as we see at 6.5 minutes, Shin has managed to... I'm not going to say recover totally, but he's kind of recovered from it. Which is that he has 41 drones and 3 bases. That still isn't enough drones. But it looks like his plan is to attack, so that makes sense as well. So he not only cleans up the cannons, opens up the possibility for a gold base again, but also is trying to get some aggression. Unfortunately, with the Reaver drop following his army, he is losing, bleeding out units as he tries to engage. It looks like he figures his army might be powerful enough to deal with this as it comes across the map, so he continues the Reaver aggression, but perhaps that was a mistake because the Reaver is dead. It's gone. Miss Micro right there, leaving the Reaver too far away from the shuttle and too close to the Queens. Now the Protoss army comes out to defend the 3rd base, but that's definitely not all of the army. Yeah, the Reaver is kind of still the most important factor here. They do finally get those Scarabs off on the Zerg army, and now the Nexus is done, so relatively healthy, but it is being surrounded. It is being taken down. It could possibly be focus fired. The Reavers will be able to save the day. I would definitely call the Reavers as the savior. The Dragoons trying their best. The Zealots were slicing away on the Lings, but the Reavers were the real threats. That shuttle is still concerningly low on health. I am concerned. But it is alive. It's even worse than a War Prism. I actually don't know the health and shields of either one to compare them. But I think as far as the fragility, they're both kind of similar. And certainly in the importance, they are both similar. They really need to be microed very well. But it is definitely a fact that the StarCraft 2 War Prism is easier to micro. There is less of a chance to have an injured War Prism die because it has the pickup range. Shuttles do not, and that makes me very concerned for the shuttle. Storm is on the way. I don't know if we already have Guidarian Amulet, but that's usually after the Storm is researched, so that's probably going to be the case here. We got the Zealot legs done. Again, unfortunate about the 2 Citadel of Adunes, but what are you going to do? +2 on the way now as well for the Protoss. Back at Shin's side of the map, he did that kind of attack, cleanup into attack that did not kill the Nexus. He did manage to get a better economy, though. 57 workers here. And the gold base on the way, probably going to go up to above 60. Roach, Ravager, Ling, Baneling. Very typical Zerg versus Protoss style. Maybe less seen nowadays, thanks to the patch and the change of the Baneling dynamic, but still pretty good. And still very good if it ends up getting us around. Rebellion has now saturated all 3 bases, moving on to a 4th base as well. There's also an interesting dynamic between the 2 games, which is that Protoss is more Zerg-like, I guess, than Protoss and StarCraft 2, which is very much about getting a death ball. We did have the development of the hero-style mass gateway, so that's something we could definitely compare and contrast. And that's, yeah, what Brood War kind of plays here. So it's going to be gateway units with Storm and a couple of Reavers from the opener. And we'll see how that actually works. Not as mobile without that blink, but a little more powerful because of the Storm. Storm is really good in Brood War. We even managed to get a different effect for them to really highlight that it is a different Storm, and it is super powerful. Drones already going down to the gold base, as that is obviously under threat. The Zerg army just simply not looking powerful enough. All the Lings getting washed off, all before that +1 melee is even done. Not that I think it would have mattered too much. Lots of probes just went down, perhaps to a run by, and the Nexus almost did too, but not actually going down, and the army is still vastly in favor of Rebellion. This is doing some really good work here, and Shin, he does such an awkward game from the opener. Didn't know exactly how to play that out. Kind of went aggressive, then tried to macro, tried to catch up with the Protoss player, but the Protoss player was kind of doing their normal opener, their normal build, and then just showed the power of that more mid-game army. Dragoon, Reaver Storm, even those Archons, very, very powerful. And Shin's kind of flimsy army that was dependent on having more. Very Zerg-like, right? Did not have enough. So Rebellion actually takes game number 1. And now we're on to Oceanborn. At the top left playing now Brood War Zerg, it is Shin. And at the bottom right playing StarCraft 2 Protoss, it is Rebellion. I pointed out that both of them more well-known for their StarCraft 2. Both of them being Korean, though, definitely familiar with StarCraft 1. Probably even still watch it on the ASL. I feel like I remember hearing about Ragnarok even maybe trying for one of the ASLs. This might have been years ago. But that was happening a little bit. You know, the players who were either really good at Brood War or even had just an interest in them, or at least like going to the qualifiers. Some, you know, made it. Obviously, a lot of them didn't. Don't quote me on that. The point is, both of them know how to play Brood War. So Rebellion definitely showed like a pretty typical way of playing Brood War Protoss. Oh, hey, Toby. How you doing? Yes, my count is a fantastic co-catster. So, Shin now plays Brood War Zerg, and how does this flip the dynamic versus StarCraft 2 Protoss? That last EVP was so shockingly close to StarCraft 2 that I could have even... like, if the units didn't look so different, that would have been almost exactly like StarCraft 2, honestly. The Stalkers look different, they didn't have Blink, but everything else, pretty much what you would expect, right? So beginning with the cannon rush, you deal with the hatchery, to the gateway-based army with some amount of AoE attached to it. That is StarCraft 2 as well. Brood War would have been very different because the Zerg perspective would have been very different. Obviously, they wouldn't have Banelings or Ravagers or Roaches. Now that it's flipped, what is going to happen? Well, again, maybe you didn't see this, but in the other series, I was talking about how the Zerg in Brood War are often that lower number, higher quality race. And then StarCraft 2 Protoss is also that same design idea. Higher quality, lower quantity. So what I imagine is going to happen is perhaps... I'm imagining. This is actually the first time I'm seeing PvZ in this mod. We managed to, I think, avoid it 2 weeks ago when we cast the one live. But what I imagine is going to happen is that the Brood War player will go into potentially a mass Hydra bust, and then into Lurkers. And then the StarCraft 2 Protoss probably going to go... Okay, well, hold on. Okay, well, if this was a typical macro game, perhaps they go into a Stargate still, and they go into a third Nexus. This is a typical maneuver in StarCraft 2, but it is definitely not the super macro typical. This is a Twilight Council on 2 bases. Resident Enclaves versus Brood War Zerg. Very interesting idea. Lings get into the main, which is a really big bummer, though. That was supposed to be more of a surprise. I am having internet troubles, so that's kind of disappointing as a streamer, but life goes on. This is going to be a Dark Shrine build. Okay, alright, yeah, okay, here's the reason I kind of just didn't even bother bringing that up. And it's because this chat has noted, Overlords are already detectors. in Brood War Zerg. So even though people absolutely die to invisible units in Brood War 100%, just watch Artosis' stream, it is harder. Well, I should say it's easier to have the tools to detect in Brood War than it is in StarCraft 2. And this is especially true for Brood War Zerg, whose overlords are natural detectors. So, let's be real, most of the time, the DTs work because, one, they're a complete surprise. No one expects them. And it works as a complete surprise because, two, they can't get the detection fast enough. But even if it's a complete surprise, which is kind of a questionable thing here in this game, because Shin got into the main to see at Twilight Council, that second thing doesn't really have an impact. Overlords exist. Overlords are on the field. In Brood War, it would be a combination of annoying-ass units, the Corsair and the DT, to really make the powerful combo work. In StarCraft 2, that equivalent would be Phoenix, but Rebellion obviously doesn't have Phoenix. So I just did not think he was going to bother DT rushing. But perhaps this DT rush is merely an appetizer. Perhaps the real intent is to get a tiniest little bit of distraction into actually an Archon charge lot push. We're almost all in at this point. I'll have 2 bases. Unfortunately, Shin did grab that Overlord speed, so it was able to scout literally everything. Dark Templars don't even bother to make an appearance, just turn right into those Archons, ready to go with the charge. Very cheesy, 2 base, Protoss all in. Highly suggest you guys steal this for ladder because it's going to work a lot of times. This game, it will not work. It will not. Against only Ling Hydra, I actually might have believed in it, but we do have Lurkers forming, and so a bunch of Lurkers forming when the Protoss has 0 detection. GG. Feels bad. In fact, Shin is so confident in the Lurkers defending all by their lonesome that he is going to go ahead and send his Lings across the map and ensure that Rebellion cannot expand. I mean, he wasn't trying to, but he really can't now. And now he also might have trouble dealing with the natural. He could try and warp in DTs to clean this up, but it would take forever, and an Overlord with speed is available very close to that particular attack point. Warp Prism tries to find Lurkers out of position, but Shin seems to be already on top of that. Had Lurkers in the main base. Drones are still very good at clumping. Very good at clumping. Very good at clumping. The one Archon shot didn't quite hit him. Now they're actually spread out thanks to their mining, and this will not end up being a 10-drone loss like I think Rebellion was hoping. And while that was going on, the front line did in fact fall. The Lings get into the main and the natural. They will not stick around, however. They got what they wanted. They got the recall. They got the warp in. And they know that there's no third base to even nibble on, so that should put Shin in a very good position for the rest of this game. Oops, Shin's starting to miss macro. There's a lot of Overlords on the way, and he still has 900 minerals. But Spores are finally coming down to help deal with the Warp Prism harassment. You don't have those Queens that you can position, and the Hydras will ideally eventually move across the map, or even turn into more Lurkers. So I actually think that's just a... It looks a little funny because it requires a 2-step process, unlike Spores in StarCraft 2. It's kind of like a, why not? Go for it. But I think it's the same kind of idea, which is like, strictly I don't need these Spores, but God, is it going to make the Warp Prism less annoying? And that, I think, is a fair enough deal. 3rd base on the way now for Rebellion. Seems like he will actually be able to get up to 3 bases. Shin moving on to a 4th, however, with still more economy than his opponent, and also getting to a very healthy number of Hydra Ling Lurker. We're at 18 Lurkers? Oh my god. That's unhealthy, but in the good way. That is a lot of Lurkers. Some could say at home to defend further harassment, but most of them could go across the map. And although Rebellion has made sure to get a Observer, the Oracle creation is not going to happen in this game as there is no Stargate. And we know that Observers are not as dependable as one would hope for being invisible. Shin, with the Overlord speed, could have the equivalent of an Overseer with his army ready to snipe any Observer that he sees, knowing that that would be a game-ending maneuver. If he even has to. You could maybe just win with the overwhelming number of units. A little split away from the Disruptor. The second Disruptor is going to get maybe a better shot here. The Hydras do pre-split as well. They do one-shot Brood War Lurkers, as you saw. But the lurker split was very, very good. Shield overcharge, not going to be able to save the day. Only one Hydra going down to that particular disruptor. Really good on Shin to be able to micro against that like that. He actually has lost so little versus these disruptors. I spoke too soon? Okay, that was a bit of a shot. But not good enough to save that third Nexus. Shin's supply might look manageable, but I think the situation is still looking a little grim for Rebellion. He finally pulls the trigger on the defense with so many lurkers, so spread out. And the Observer could be sniped. I don't think Shin was actually sniping it. I think AI was doing that. Oh well, say la vie. Shin does lose all of his army. He has more on the way. In fact, just Hydra is coming out on the way. Not a whole lot of Lings. No lurkers as of yet. He's not going to bother waiting to form them either. He's going to go for it. No shield battery overcharge available. Nexus very, very low. Could be sniped. Observer could also still be a target, so then you could make lurkers after that. But it looks like Rebellion has managed to hold on. Shin down in supply. But as a Brood War Zerg, I don't actually think that's a death sentence that it would be in StarCraft 2. This would be a terrible supply. This would be to start talking about the next game supply. But in Brood War, I do believe that's quite different. Hive is on the way as well, so Shin, who was lacking in some technology, will then be able to add on bigger and better units. Ultras do make a play in Brood War EVP. I don't know if that would be useful in this game. But I think Defilers would be useful. And that's exactly what I'm thinking will happen, Defilers. Defilers aren't as cool, I guess, because their Dark Swarm will not stop disruptors from one-shotting the lurkers. But as far as everything else here, it would be helpful. We don't have that many lurkers as of yet. We don't have Defilers as of yet. It is back to just numbers right now. Enough Ling Hydra Lurker to hopefully make it work. Rebellion is pushing in and is looking to be in a damn fine position, but can't underestimate how much Shin actually has. So he's very tentative. Doesn't want to push in and get potentially surrounded. And Shin was certainly setting one up. Ling run by as well going down. Not too many upgrades for either side. Just +1 missile, +1 ground for Rebellion. Observer still intact, still helping out. Disruptor is still being a very fearsome component of the Protoss army, causing a lot of crowd control and threatening to kill those lurkers. Was that a kill? That was a canceled fourth Nexus. That third, though, is still so injured from earlier on. That could actually be killed. Lings are getting a little distracted, however. +1 melee final finishes for them, and more Lings come on over, as well as a couple of Hydras. It looks like Shin has given up a little more room on the defense in exchange for a little bit more of a base trade opportunity, which might just be the exact right call, especially as all of the disruptors, all but one, get taken out. They're on the wrong side of the army. If they're on the right side, I do not believe they could be sniped. That is a big loss there, as Rebellion also starts to lose control of his home base. Natural third and main could very well be under threat. Natural being broken open just means so many problems in the future should this game continue. Natural Nexus will go down. Third Nexus could still be a target from the Hydras or that one lurker right there. Rebellion, feeling the pressure, needing to actually complete this base race, is going to stay on the opposite side of the map. But I don't know if he can actually break enemy lines. We got Sunkens, we got lurkers. Where is the Observer? Where is the Observer? The Observer died. The Observer died! One lurker was actually not burrowed, and two actually got hit by the Disruptor, which takes out all the lurkers, I think, on the defense. But the Ling Hydra seems to be doing just barely good enough, and the Ling's coming back from the harassment to get a full surround here. Warp Prism goes down. Blink can only get you so far. And Rebellion, who actually looked on the verge of victory almost with this attack right here when his army was intact. That looked very scary. Ends up losing control of the situation. Shin's run by his almost base trade was a great idea. At 100% gave him control over the game. It's the final game here in this best of 3. In the bottom left, he is Shin. And in the bottom right, we have Rebellion. And they're playing on a map called Polypoid. Brood War maps ported over to StarCraft 2 always have a different look to them. And I don't know exactly why that is. I mean, I know how that is, but I don't know why there are so few StarCraft 2 maps that look like Brood War maps. You know what I mean? And I think what I'm really saying is that apparently there are no StarCraft 2 maps that ever want to use this palette. Like, it's clearly available in StarCraft 2, and they're like green with brown? No thank you. And I think Avex actually came in and said thanks for the compliment, so I assume he's created some of the Brood War maps. And so big ups to the guys who were transferring the Brood War map to StarCraft 2. This is now the StarCraft 2 Zerg Shin versus the Brood War Protoss Rebellion. Just to be super clear. Polypoid as a Brood War map probably has no forced spawns, if I had to guess. But it is in a StarCraft 2 game, so I don't know for sure. And he's gonna cannon rush! Oh my god! This is a classic StarCraft 2 cannon rush, but clearly available to the Brood War player as well. The difference would be that the Brood War player was gonna make a forge anyway. But for those old school players out there, you remember the days when StarCraft 2 also opened up with the Forge Fast Expand, and this was 100% an option. The Zerg player had to default, anticipate the cannon rush, and be happy if the cannon rush didn't happen. But it was always a possibility if the Zerg player was too greedy. And then it, doesn't exist anymore in StarCraft 2. But Brood War, it is alive and well. Rebellion with the wall off on the main to ensure that the cannon could get up and running causes Shin to cancel that hatchery. Now, this seems like a really good opener, and it is. But it's also not the worst opener for a Zerg ever in the history of StarCraft. This is something that actually Shin is probably still very familiar with, even though his time as a championship contender has only arrived after the cannon rush meta. He's probably still very familiar with having to cancel his hatchery and get his third hatch and blah, 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 blah. So clearly he also knows where his opponent is, and he knows that the cannon rush is really all that can happen at this particular point in time. You're not going to have an immediate follow-up, especially as the Nexus is being taken, so that scout's really good. Rebellion even added on an additional cannon, which I don't actually get the additional cannon. I was trying to think it through. Well, that queen shouldn't die. Okay, good. It ended up being just awkward enough. Okay, all right, never mind. I assumed that cannon wasn't going to do really anything. By the time that Shin decided that he could deal with the cannons, he would. And it wouldn't be sloppy, it wouldn't be weird. But that definitely was. Losing that many lings, almost losing the queen. I guess the surprise factor of the second cannon was kind of worth it. But eventually this will be cleaned up because, the pylon goes down. And I guess Rebellion really did just want to extend the lifespan of the contain, if you can call it that. And it did, kind of. Drones also escape just moments before the cannon dies, knowing they wouldn't be targeted. 2 bases for the Zerg now up and running, although a very long distance on the reinforcing drones. Something to consider, but not unusual. The Rebellion is going to go into that same opener as game number 1. Yeah, because there was also cannon rushing game number 1. Very different reason for the cannon rush, but there still was one. And then into the Reaver drop, into the Dragoons. And like I said, it doesn't have to be an attack, a 2-base attack follow-up, but it can be. So I actually think the Rebellion might do that, because I think in the number 1 StarCraft Evolution League, I want to say Rebellion or another Protoss player, they did one game with the Reaver into Gateway Macro, and they did a second game with the Reaver into 2-base all-in. I want to say it was Rebellion. Don't quote me on that. But, it's a possibility. It's a way of playing on a best of, because you've made perhaps them think, oh, he's only going to macro. It is also a map that has spawned you in these horizontal positions, so it's really close by ground. Kind of encourages any idea of aggression. I've convinced myself. I think it's going to be the 2-base version. Citadel of Adun is on the way, I believe faster than game 1. Also, notably, only a single one. That's already an improvement there. But I think it is faster, and I'm really feeling this attack. It is, I think, also the preference of the Protoss on this map in general. Maybe not if it's diagonal spawn, I guess, but if it's vertical or horizontal, it seems to be the choice of Protoss players. Things get a little awkward for that poor Dragoon. Reaver can only save it so much. It's got to prioritize his own health and safety after all. But really, this Reaver never wants to be totally pushed away, because this is the frontline scout pressure hold for the Protoss on the front line that would then go into the attack. Good lord, that was dangerous. So many queens were coming over to react to that shuttle. That was extremely dangerous. Fortunately, Rebellion does save that shuttle. Now, if you guys don't know, the shuttle cannot warp in like a warp prism, just to make that super, super clear. It's not as integral to the attack as far as that reinforcing pattern, but it is still very important to be able to micro your Reavers and save them from being focus fired. So you definitely still need it. Dragoon range is on the way. Legs, there you go. Zealot speed is so much faster than the first game. So much. So much so that if Shin is really getting quite familiar with this mod and knows Protoss, you know, to a certain degree, that he actually might have been able to tell that there's something amiss, not just from the lack of the attempt to take a third base, which could happen because the army's not big enough yet, but rather by the lack of technology on the Cybernetics core. There's no pretending that was Warp Gate as a Brood War Protoss. So if Shin was really paying close attention, he should be kind of stroking his chin right now and being like, why was Dragoon range so late? And again, maybe focus on that third base timing. Two Reavers still alive, getting some pretty good shots, by the way. I don't really think you want Lings so much so going after them. Templar Archives on the way as well. Third Reaver, in fact, too. Shin still with the Overlord, actually now an Overseer, is going to get full information. The third base is on the way, but if I recall correctly, this is taken while doing the kind of still big attack. I mean, 7 gateways performed first and foremost, so I'm wondering if this is actually just a changed idea. It seemed like it was going to be very committed on the attack, but perhaps shifting gears, realizing that's not going to be as worth it. Nonetheless, perhaps I was just wrong, and this was actually going to be macro all the time, but the third base is on the way. Templar Archives now producing that storm, so that's at least going to, be at that long before a push really happens. They got an observatory on the way as well, which I think is really a macro sign, unless you were terrified they just jumped right up to lurkers. And Shin, well, it's done Zerg things. StarCraft 2 Zerg things. +1 melee is on the way. Roach speed, Certifical Hooks is done. He's going Ling, Baneling, Roach, Ravager yet again on 3 bases, moving up to a 4th. Very typical if you watch StarCraft 2. For Rebellion, he is going to focus on the defense. No attack. Definitely not. They had to have been a different choice, right? Like, because so many gateways were produced, and he's not able to use all of them while expanding. So this must have been just like a, oh shit, it's not going to work. And what told him it wouldn't work? I'm not sure, but maybe the Reavers just didn't do enough damage. Maybe he thought that Shin wasn't being greedy enough under the pressure. Either way, now it's Rebellion. I was going to say being more on the defensive, but he did move out in game 1. Showed the power of Storm as the Brood War side. And it looks like it is going to be something similar here. Now able to use all of his gateways, as the third is mining. Obviously, it's a bit of a half-third. Technically, if this was Brood War, it'd be more of a full third, because there's only 1 gas. But it's not the biggest economic boost. Oh my god, the storms. Oh my god. Oh my god. No! Shuttle! Almost died to its own storm. Actually now comes in behind. Shin was trying to go for the surprise, basically. He was probably... I don't think it's worked, though. I think Shin was basically like, I'm just going to try to envelop you. I'm just going to rush on you, so by the time you realize what's happening, you haven't dropped your Reavers out, you haven't stormed me, and you don't want to storm your own army. But I don't know if that actually worked. Shin not winning that battle, technically, but it does have some time to get some reinforcements on the field. That's exactly what he's trying to do. Storm starting to run out here. Archon being merged. Shuttle getting dangerously low on health. Does go down. Reavers as well. Banelings don't want to help. Okay. It was so funny. Guaranteed he realized that the Banelings weren't necessary and that he would rather have them for any zealots on the way. But there weren't that many zealots on the way. He also could have used it on those Dragoons. Either way, Shin, with the reinforcements, last-second defense, comes together and tears down Rebellion's push. No doubt helped by the fact that there is no Warp Gate. There are no warp prisms, and the Reavers, the AoE, had finally depleted itself. All the storms were gone, and the Reavers were in too vulnerable of a scenario. If those things all were a different factor, you know, there was a storm but not the Reavers. There was the Reavers but not the storm. There was the... I don't know. Whatever else. Like, that actually might have worked as a push. But unfortunately, just not quite enough. And Shin now has control over the game as Banelings roll on into the probes. 12 of them go down. Shin on 4 bases. 72 drones, by the way. So all you gotta do is survive and then hopefully get the army in place. And that's exactly what happened. But that is a scenario where I really envision if it was Stalkers, they're blinking away, they're focus firing, they're managing the situation while Warp Prism warps in, you know, 8 more Zealots. And I think that might be game over, because Shin was pushed very nearly to the central portion of his reinforcements. And when your reinforcements get caught up, that's a really dangerous place to be. But without enough momentum, Rebellion couldn't push on through. Trying to push here again as he grabs a 4th base, but the 4th base is a goner. Nothing to defend that. Only 2 storms in Rebellion's pocket, and the High Templars are clearly the focus of the Banelings right now. One of them did go down. Only 1 storm available. Ravagers not able to connect those Corrosive Biles, but still threatening with them. Ensures the Dragoons ever go face first into it. Plus, the Banelings have been reformed. Plus, the Lings have now +2 melee. And they are ripping those Dragoons apart. No chance. And that is it. Shin will 2-1 and advance on to the finals of this Open Cup. GG's.